Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
I'm joined by Phil Bicknell from ADHB at their Meat Export Conference. Phil, you delivered a paper this morning introducing your latest Horizon publication on the implications on what it would be like for the UK meat industry defaulting into a WTO type scenario. What exactly would WTO mean for the UK meat industry?
Well, I think today what we've launched is a look at World Trade Organisation and its implications for UK agriculture. So we were looking around some of the challenges around farming policy, because that's obviously a key factor. I'm conscious when it comes to beef and lamb production here in the UK. I suppose the average beef and sheep producer is relatively reliant on farm support and direct support to take them from out of the red and into the black. So I suppose there's one challenge there around the finances from a farming perspective. The other aspect is around trade. That was the kind of key angle. We all know from looking at the trade figures that UK is very reliant on export markets for its lamb, particularly in terms of the French market. We're also a significant trader when it comes to beef, particularly with product coming in from Republic of Ireland into the UK. Mm-hmm. If we start to face some tariffs and some barriers from World Trade Organisation as a result of not getting a trade deal in place and having to resort to a World Trade Organisation default on tariffs, that all adds cost, creates barriers, and would ultimately impact trade flows.
It would essentially have a nuclear effect, I suppose, on the meat trade, both into and out of the UK, because, whilst the UK may be a net importer of beef, for example, you still, in your search for carcass balance, you still are quite a significant exporter at the same time.
Yeah, exactly, and I suppose that's the case with a whole host of livestock products as well. We are increasingly, when it comes to our trade, it's not about shipping carcasses, it's about shipping specific products and specific parts of the carcass to different markets around the world. So that's probably a key factor. The point that you make there about the significant impact, well, I suppose when I look at some of the tariff rates, and some of this information is included in our latest report and is picked up in some of the reports we've done previously, the tariff rates that we'd face if we weren't to get a trade deal in place with Europe would be pretty high. We're looking at 60-70% in some instances, depending on the cuts. We hear politicians, we hear them talk about the average tariff rate being around 10%. Livestock products, agricultural products tend to be much higher than that average rate.
Obviously, ADHB get the complexities of all of this, given the series that you have produced. The Minister Eustace, who's responsible for agriculture, fisheries and food, referenced your publication. Do you feel that politicians are fully understanding the implications for this sector?
Firstly, it's fantastic that our Horizon report series has gone down so well, and I think it's reached a really wide audience, and not just here in the UK, but I think internationally. And the fact that it's getting into various people's hands is great, because that's what it was intended for. It was intended to help farmers here in the UK to make some sense of what are really complex issues, but it was also intended to help businesses and help policymakers when it comes to the future. In terms of where we go from a future perspective. We've looked at some of the big issues. I think we start to get into some of the technical complexities, and certainly this most recent report does start to pick up some really complex areas. I think increasingly where we start to think about, from looking at what we're going to do next with the Horizon series, is trying to think through some of the implications for farmers, because I suppose when I put my farmer hat on, at the end of the day, being able to influence some of that policy is a real challenge for me as an individual. What I can do more about is look at my own business and just think about how ready am I for the Brexit future.
An interesting aside you shared with us, Phil, this morning was you were very conscious that on your own farm the calves that have been born this spring will go into the meat chain at a time whenever we're outside of the EU. Are you then just thinking as a farmer, does that leave you optimistic as to where you go? Because certainly the Minister this morning in his presentation did seem to see nothing but the positives of what we could do in this new situation. Is he being realistic there, or does he need to recalibrate his thinking to some extent?
I think I suppose coming from a farming background, it's always an advantage for me to be able to see different perspectives. previous employment history, I used to work for the US Department of Agriculture, was bringing in product from America into the UK, into Europe. So I also know some of the hurdles that we face if you want to trade with the EU. And probably one of the most interesting things today was hearing the guy from the UK Chamber of Shipping talking about really some of the practical challenges that we might face if we don't get that frictionless trade deal. We know what government is aiming for, what they want, and they've obviously been forthright again. We heard that again today in terms of frictionless trade and minimal delays. I suppose we can't help but think about what some of the challenges might be if we don't get to that position. But I'm encouraged and heartened that there is that optimistic talk about wanting to get to something that is going to be minimally disruptive.
Phil Bicknell, ADHB, thank you very much.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie and on iTunes every Thursday.